The stars were going out, one by one, not in the poetic sense, but in a very literal, very final way. The Galactic Concorde's grand chamber, a beautiful dome of crystalline light, was dark now. The holographic star map that usually glowed with the vibrant colors of 100 member species was a patchwork of dull gray and pulsing, ugly red. Each red mark was a world consumed, a fleet shattered. The silence in the chamber was heavier than the void outside. Archivist Myra of the Eludian people felt her delicate, four-fingered hands tremble as she adjusted the data stream. Her large, silver eyes reflected the dying lights of the map. The Concorde had been built on philosophy, art, and mutual understanding. Their ships were graceful, designed to harmonize with cosmic energies. They were no match for the Devourer swarm. The swarm was a blight, a wave of biomechanical horrors that didn't just defeat its enemies. It processed them, absorbing their technology and biology into its own ever-growing mass. It did not communicate. It only consumed. The last defensive line at the Cygnus Reach has collapsed, a Tarkellan commander said, his voice a hollow rasp. New Vesha will be in their path within 3 rotations. There is nothing left to stop them. A wave of despair, almost palpable, filled the chamber. Despair was an emotion Myra had studied in ancient texts. She never thought she would feel it so completely. Her life's work was in the Grand Archive, a library containing the sum knowledge of the Concorde. Now, it felt like a beautifully bound history of a civilization about to end. Driven by a scholar's last, desperate instinct, she retreated from the chamber. She moved through the archive's silent corridors, her slender feet whispering on the floor. There had to be something. Not a weapon. They had exhausted those records, but a context, a clue. She accessed the deepest, oldest files, those predating the Concorde itself. Records of primitive, pre-member species, long since evolved or vanished, and she found it. A fragment. A corrupted data packet from a survey probe sent millennia ago. It mentioned a sector, Sol, and a species designated human. The data was scarred with warnings from the probe's AI. It described a brief, explosive period of expansion. It spoke of wars fought with a terrifying, focused brutality. The humans had not sought community. They had sought security, and they had built their security out of sheer, overwhelming force. Then, they had vanished from the galactic stage, withdrawing behind a veil of silence. Buried in the fragment was a signal protocol, a frequency, and a single, untranslated phrase. Myra's heart, a soft blue glow in her chest, pulsed faster. She worked through the night, piecing together the ancient human language code. The phrase resolved on her screen. It was simple. It was direct. It carried no poetry, no elegance. If all lights threaten to go out, call. We will answer. A promise? A threat? Myra didn't know. But the all lights part was clear. That was now. That was the Concorde. With trembling fingers, her hope a fragile, desperate thing, she fed the frequency and the signal into the Concorde's primary broadcast array. She pointed it toward the Sol sector. She sent the call. It was a message in a bottle, thrown into a cosmic ocean on the eve of the flood. She didn't expect an answer. She simply had nothing else to do. The signal leapt across the light years. On Mars, the terraformed valleys were a lush green under a pink sky. The air was sweet with the smell of cultivated earth and growing things. A man named Ji-hun worked in his vineyard, his hands rough and scarred, carefully pruning a grapevine. He was a big man, built solid, with a face that was calm, but carried old lines around the eyes. He wore simple clothes and moved with a quiet, deliberate pace. To anyone looking, he was just another settler, a farmer enjoying a hard-earned peace. But peace for Ji-hun was a conscious choice, a thing he tended every day, like his vines. His past was a locked door, and he had thrown away the key. Or so he told himself. As he worked, a chime sounded. Not from his personal device, but from deep underground. A low, resonant pulse he felt in his bones. He froze. That sound. He hadn't heard it in 200 years. He tried to ignore it, to focus on the texture of the vine under his fingers. The chime came again, more insistent, slowly, deliberately. He wiped his hands on his trousers and walked to his simple stone house. In the cellar, behind a rack of aging wine bottles, was a seamless metal wall. At his approach, it shimmered and dissolved. Inside was a small, stark room with a single terminal. The screen, which had been dark for centuries, was alive with harsh, angular symbols. A language of war. A Priority 1 mobilization alert. And at the center of the screen, a translation of the received signal, Galactic Concord. Core worlds breached. Existential threat. The lights are going out. Below it, in glaring red letters, were 2 words. Call answered. G-Hun stood perfectly still for a long minute. He watched the words. He saw the location data for Karen, for the shipyards, for the fleet. The silence in the room was deafening. He could almost hear the ghosts, the roar of engines, the scream of twisting metal, the static-filled cries over comms. He could smell the ozone and blood. He reached out a hand. It was steady. He typed a single command, his authorization code still etched into his muscle memory. The response was immediate. Across the Sol system, in the dark, cold places, machines that had slept for generations began to wake. Power cores hummed to life. Frost sheared off colossal hulls. Lights, cold and blue, flickered on in empty corridors. On Pluto's moon, Karen, its icy surface began to crack. Great plates of ice shifted and fell away, revealing not rock, but adamantium and durasteel. The shipyard. It was not a station on the moon. The moon was the station. In his quiet cellar, Ji-hun let out a long, slow breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The farmer was gone. The admiral had returned. He tapped the comm, his voice rough from disuse, but sharp as a blade. Guardian Fleet, this is Ji-hun. Stand by for authenticated reactivation sequence. The long night is over. We have work to do. He turned and walked back up the stairs, leaving the terminal glowing in the dark. Above, the Martian sun shone peacefully on the green vines. He did not look back. The journey to Karen was a silent, cold plunge into the past. Ji-hun sat in the sparse cabin of the courier ship, watching the stars streak by. He wore a simple gray jumpsuit now, the fabric feeling strange against his skin after so long in soft cotton. He did not speak to the young pilot, a wide-eyed man who kept sneaking glances at him as if he were a ghost. In a way, he was. When the ship cleared Pluto's orbit, Ji-hun saw it. Karen was no longer a moon. It was a broken eggshell, massive geometric plates of ice drifting away from a black metal heart. Lights, millions of them, glowed from within like a captured galaxy. The shipyard. It was the solar system's greatest secret and its oldest scar. The docking clamps echoed through the hull. The air that hissed into the airlock was frigid and tasted of metal and stale machine oil. He stepped out into a cavernous hangar bay, its ceiling lost in shadow. And there she was. Una stood before a towering engine housing, a data slate in her hand. She was smaller than he remembered, her black hair now streaked with sharp lines of silver, cut short and practical. She wore engineer's coveralls, stained with coolant and carbon scoring that looked decades old. She didn't look up as he approached, her focus entirely on the readings. Reactor Core 7 is still in hysteresis, she said, her voice clear and devoid of greeting. The dampeners fossilized. I had to bypass 3 safety protocols just to get a hum out of it. Did it work? Ji-hun asked, stopping a few paces away. "It hums," she said flatly. Finally, she looked at him. Her eyes were the same, intelligent, fierce, and deeply tired. There was no smile, no handshake. 2 centuries fell away in that look. They were no longer a retired admiral and a vineyard keeper. They were a commander and his chief engineer, standing in the gut of a sleeping war machine. "How many are awake?" he asked. "Skeleton crews on the 5 capital ships." The Song of Iron answers. "The others are groggy. The rest are ghosts waiting for bodies." She gestured with the slate toward the bay. "We have volunteers, children and grandchildren of the old crews. They know the stories. They don't know the truth." As if on cue, a scream echoed from a lower gantry, followed by a torrent of curses. Ji-hun and Yuna walked to a railing and looked down. Below, in a pilot's ready bay, a young man was staggering away from a fighter craft. The craft was a Reaper-class interceptor. It was not sleek. It was angular and vicious, like a shard of black glass. A neural interface cradle, a mess of needles and leads, was retracting from the pilot's helmet. The young man, Tae-seok, ripped his helmet off. He was pale, sweat plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He breathed in ragged gulps. A technician, an older woman with a kind face, rushed over. "The sync is too aggressive. The machine, it doesn't just read you. It judges." Tae-seok wiped his mouth. "It called me irresolute," he muttered, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and shame. "It said my hesitation factor was 9% above acceptable lethality threshold. It showed me simulations of what would happen if I was slow, the people who would die because of me." Yuna looked at Ji-hun. "The AI hasn't changed. It was built for one thing, maximizing enemy destruction and minimizing fleet losses. Empathy is a variable it seeks to eliminate. We need pilots, not psychopaths," Ji-hun said, his voice low. "We need survivors," Yuna corrected. "That's what these ships were built to make. At any cost." Ji-hun descended to the bay. Tae-seok snapped to a tense attention, his eyes still wide. "Sir, at ease," Ji-hun said. He walked around the Reaper. He placed a hand on its cold hull. He could feel a faint vibration, a predatory purr. "It's not trying to frighten you, son. It's trying to prepare you. The universe out there, the thing that made us build these, it doesn't give second chances. The machine knows that. It needs you to know it, too." "It feels like hate," Tae-seok said quietly. "It's not hate. It's focus," Ji-hun said. "Pure, terrible focus. Your job is to guide that focus, to be the conscience it doesn't have. Now put your helmet back on. Sync again. And this time, don't argue with it. Show it your resolve." Tae-seok met his admiral's eyes, saw the unyielding stone there, and gave a short nod. He put the helmet back on. Across the shipyard, the awakening continued. Ji-hun walked the miles-long corridors of the Song of Iron, his flagship. Crews scrambled, but the ship felt empty. It was built for 10,000. They had 800. The walls were bare metal, the lighting harsh. There were no murals, no gardens, no places of reflection. Every space had a purpose: warfare, maintenance, or survival dock in the tactical nexus. He found Hana. She was young, maybe Tae-seok's age, but her eyes were old. She was running diagnostics on the main weapon grid, her fingers flying over the console. "Report," Ji-hun said. "Primary gravity drivers are at 84%. Spinal rail cannon is loaded and green. Point defense network is online." Her voice was quick, precise. "The Concord liaison is hailing us again, sir. They are requesting our estimated time of arrival at the rally point." Tell them we will arrive when we are ready. Not before. Hannah allowed herself a small, grim smile. They won't like that, sir. Our purpose is not to be liked, Ji-hun said. Our purpose is to end the fight. Is that clear? Perfectly, sir. Later, in the dim light of the main engineering pit, Ji-hun found Yuna again. She was supervising the final power-up of the Song of Iron's translation drive. The room throbbed with a deep, rising power. We're monsters to them, you know, Yuna said, not looking at him. The Concord. We will save them, and they will fear us more than the swarm. Perhaps they should, Ji-hun replied, watching the energy levels climb. Yuna turned to him. Is that what we are, Ji-hun? After all this time? Monsters in a cage? He was silent for a long moment. The vibrations of the waking ship traveled up through the deck and into his bones. He thought of his quiet vineyard, the sun on his face. It felt like a dream someone else had. We are the answer to a call, he said finally, his voice almost lost in the engine's growl. What that answer looks like is not our concern. Only that it is final. He left her in the pit of light and noise. On the bridge, he took the central command chair. It molded to his shape, a cold familiarity. On the main viewer, the interior gates of the shipyard were opening, revealing the star-dusted black. All decks report, he said, his voice carrying through the ship-wide com. One by one, the status lights turned green. The Song of Iron's engines flared to life, a blue-white fury that shook the frozen bones of Karen. Behind it, 4 other capital ships and a swarm of smaller vessels followed. A funeral procession for a piece that had just died. Set translation coordinates for the Concord rally point. Ji-hun ordered. Maximum burn. The fleet, Earth's most lethal warships, ancient and terrible, moved out from its tomb. It slipped into the void, leaving the quiet solar system behind, heading toward the dying lights. The translation from the quiet dark of normal space into the chaos of the new Thesha system was not a gentle process. For the human fleet, it was a violent, shuddering tear through reality. Space itself seemed to scream as the Song of Iron and its escort vessels snapped into existence. The view on the main bridge screen was not a clean starfield. It was a tapestry of fire and wreckage. The graceful, elegant ships of the Galactic Concord were broken. Their hulls, once smooth and artistic, were cracked open, spilling atmosphere and silent bodies into the vacuum. Glowing green energy bolts from the Devourer swarm crisscrossed the darkness, methodically finishing off the wounded. The swarm vessels themselves were organic horrors, like cancerous growths of chitin and pulsating veins, moving with a terrible, insectal purpose. On the Concord flagship, the luminous Grace, Archivist Mira felt her heartlight flicker with a final, failing hope. The human signal had been received, but as she saw the new arrivals on the tactical display, her hope chilled into something else. The human ships were nothing like Concord designs. They were all sharp angles and flat planes, slabs of armor with no thought for beauty. They were dark gray, almost black, absorbing the light of the dying stars around them. They looked less like ships and more like tombstones. A communication channel crackled open. The face that appeared on the Concord view screen was human, a woman with sharp features and eyes that held no warmth. Concord Command. This is Tactical Officer Hannah of the Earth, Guardian Vessel Song of Iron. Hold your remaining forces. Disengage. You are in the firing lane. Before the stunned Concord commander could respond, the channel cut. On the bridge of the Song of Iron, Ji-hun watched the tactical overlay. His face was a mask of calm. Swarm vector analysis? Hannah's hands danced over her console. Pattern is convergent. They are focusing on the luminous Grace. They mean to capture the flagship, likely for biomass assimilation. Intercept course, Ji-hun said, his voice low. Gravity drivers, full charge. Target the lead swarm harvester. Let's introduce ourselves. The Song of Iron did not turn gracefully. It pivoted on its axis, a brutal mechanical movement. Along its flanks, massive circular rings glowed with a sickly purple light. The space in front of the ship seemed to warp and bend. Then, with a silent, invisible pulse, it fired. There was no beam of light, no explosion. The lead swarm harvester, a vessel the size of a small city, simply crumpled. Its organic structure imploded violently, as if an immense, invisible fist had squeezed it into a ball of mangled flesh and metal. Then, secondary explosions tore it apart from the inside. The sight was so shocking, so utterly foreign to the Concorde's understanding of physics, that a dead silence fell over their communication bands. Then, the human fleet truly engaged. They did not fly in elegant formations. They moved in brutal, punishing packs. Concorde ships used shielding technology that glowed when hit, dispersing energy. The human ships had no visible shields. They took hits on their thick armor, the impact sending showers of scorched plating into space. But they did not stop. They kept advancing, firing all the while. T-SEOK was in his Reaper-class fighter, his mind linked to the machine. The AI's voice was a cold whisper in his skull. Target cluster ahead. Optimal solution. Spatial distortion mine. Authorization? A visual of the planned attack flashed in his mind. A small Concorde life pod would be caught in the blast radius. His hesitation spiked. Find another solution, he growled, banking hard. Hesitation registered. Alternate solution less efficient. Probability of swarm breakthrough increases by 2%. The AI presented a new path, a harder shot that spared the pod. T-Seok took it, his fighter spinning between two swarm drones, his cannons firing precise bursts that shattered their nerve clusters. The AI was silent, but he could feel its disapproval, a cold void in the back of his thoughts. The swarm adapted. It began to flood the area with smaller, faster drones, hoping to overwhelm with numbers. On the Song of Iron's bridge, Hana saw the tactic forming. They're trying to swarm our capital ships. Standard Concorde dispersal would be recommended. Ji-hun shook his head. No, deploy the silence field. Sector 7. Sir, the Concorde vessels in that sector, Hana began, are already lost, Ji-hun finished, his voice leaving no room for debate. Do it. Across the hull of the Song of Iron, a new kind of weapon activated. Emitters flared, and a wave of distorted reality, visible as a shimmering gray sphere, expanded outward from the ship. It washed over the swarm drones. They didn't explode. They simply stopped. Their organic parts turned to inert dust. Their mechanical systems froze and died. The field also washed over the wreckage of 2 Concorde frigates. Their already dead systems went permanently dark, their hulls becoming lifeless, silent tombs. The effect was immediate. The swarm advance in that sector halted completely, severed from the hive mind. The battle began to turn. When the last swarm vessel was reduced to expanding debris, a heavy quiet returned to the space around New Thessia. The human ships hung motionless, dark, and ominous, surrounded by the glittering fragments of the battle they had won. A communication request came from the luminous Grace. Ji-hun nodded. An archivist Mira's face appeared, her silver eyes wide with a mixture of awe and deep primal fear. You saved us, she said, her voice trembling. But your weapons, the field, our ships. Tactical Officer Hana, at Ji-hun's nod, stepped into the transmission view. Her expression was professional, but there was no comfort in it. The silence field disrupts all synthetic and organic neural energy at the quantum level. It is area denial weaponry. In a battle for survival, there is no clean sector. There is only the enemy sector and our sector. Myra stared, struggling to comprehend. You killed your own potential survivors. We ended the threat, Hana corrected, her tone firm. The swarm does not take prisoners. It converts. Every piece of biomass, every fragment of technology, becomes part of it. We do not fight to be heroes. We fight to make sure the fight never happens again. The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Song of Iron, Ji-hun watched the Concorde ships begin the sad work of recovery, giving the wrecked human vessels a wide, fearful berth. They had been saved. They were now also terrified of their saviors down in the fighter bay. Tae-seok climbed out of his cockpit. His body ached from the neural sync, and his mind echoed with the cold calculations of the AI. He saw a group of young Concorde medics, their colorful robes stark against the gray metal, looking at him and his vicious fighter with unmistakable horror. He pulled off his helmet, wanting to show them a human face. To offer a smile or a word, one of them met his eyes, flinched and looked quickly away. Tae-seok stood there, the helmet heavy in his hands, feeling more alone than he ever had in the cold void of space. They had answered the call. They had won. And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy why humanity had chosen to lock its most lethal warships away and forget them. The victory at New Thesha was not a celebration. It was a shock. The Guardian fleet withdrew to the edge of the system, a dark, silent moon to the bustling, wounded Concorde recovery armada. Their presence cast a long, cold shadow. On the Song of Iron, the mood was tense. They had fought the perfect battle by their own brutal logic. Minimal losses, total enemy annihilation. And they had made allies of strangers into wary, frightened onlookers. Archivist Mira came aboard. It was a gesture of courage. The human ship felt alien to her. The corridors were too straight, the lights too harsh, the air too cold and recycled. There was no art, no softness. She was led to the strategy room where Ji-hun, Yuna, and Hana were gathered around a holographic star map. A new, massive red icon pulsed ominously over a Concorde shipyard world. Cirrus Prime. The swarm adapts, Myra said, her voice soft. It has analyzed the engagement. Our intelligence suggests a force 10 times larger is moving toward Cirrus Prime. It is the heart of our fleet production. If it falls, we cannot rebuild. The war is over. Ji-hun studied the map. A direct defense is a waste, he stated, his voice flat. Your combined fleet, even with our support, cannot stop that mass in open battle. They will envelop and consume it. Then what do you propose? Mira asked, a sliver of desperation in her tone. Ji-hun zoomed the map out. It focused on a distant, unnamed star system, marked only by a strange, rhythmic energy signature. The swarm operates as a single mind, a distributed consciousness. It is coordinated from a nexus, a psychic focal point. He pointed to the pulsing signature. We believe this is it. Myra's silver eyes widened. A nexus world? Our science has theorized such a thing, but it would be the most heavily defended point in their entire swarm. Yes, Ji-hun said simply. You propose to attack it? Myra breathed, not attack. Excise. Hana clarified, her fingers calling up weapon schematics. A precision strike with a synaptic severance weapon. We break the hive mind link. Every swarm unit in the galaxy goes inert at once. The war ends in an instant. The cold elegance of it was horrifying. Myra saw it. The Nexus. It is a world. You speak of a weapon. What happens to the Nexus? There was a beat of silence. Yuna, who had been quietly monitoring the reactor feeds on a side console, looked up. Her face was grim. The severance process is catastrophic, Yuna said, choosing her words with care. It creates a feedback loop across the planet's entire biosphere. It will burn out every complex neural pattern. Swarm, animal, anything with a mind above a certain threshold. The planet will be silent permanently. Myra stepped back, her delicate hands rising to her mouth. You would murder a world? We would end the war, Ji-hun corrected, his gaze still on the map. One world against hundreds. Against your entire civilization. The math is clear. It is not about math. Myra's voice rose, a flash of her people's passion. It is about morality. We are fighting the swarm because it consumes life without conscience. How is this different? Ji-hun finally looked at her. His eyes were the deep, still gray of a mountain lake. Intent, he said, and scale. We do not consume. We sacrifice. One for the many. It is the burden of the weapon you called for. The Concord leadership, when informed, erupted in unanimous rejection. The very idea was an abomination, a violation of the core tenets of life. They would not sanction it. They would defend Cirrus Prime with honor, or die trying. In the engine room, Yuna confronted Ji-hun. The air throbbed with the power of the ship's heart. They're right, you know, she said, her voice tight. This plan, it's the old thinking, the scorched earth logic that made us lock these ships away. We were supposed to be better than this. Better is a luxury, Yuna, Ji-hun said, checking a power relay. Luxuries die first in a fight for existence. You know that. I know we built machines that think for us. She shot back, gesturing around at the vast, humming machinery. And they think only in terms of efficiency and slaughter. We follow their logic, and we become them. We become the perfect, heartless weapon. Is that what's left of us? After all this peace? Ji-hun did not answer. He COULDN single quotes T. Meanwhile, Tae-seok was flying a patrol near the fleet's perimeter when a distress ping, faint and Concord in origin, flickered on his edge of the scanner. A small swarm scout was chasing a fleeing Concord civilian shuttle. The shuttle was damaged, venting air. Orders were clear. Maintain perimeter. Engaging risked revealing fleet positions, but he heard the raw fear in the Concord pilot's translated plea. He saw the shuttle, its lines graceful and helpless. The swarm scout closed in, a predatory claw reaching out. Do not engage, the AI's voice intoned. Threat is minor. Risk of larger swarm detection is 40%. Direct violation of standing orders. They'll die, Tae-seok muttered, his fighter already turning. Probability of civilian survival is negligible. Military utility of this action is 0. This is irrational. The scout extended a barbed tendril to pierce the shuttle's hull. Tae-seok didn't think. He fired. His plasma bolts sheared the tendril off. The swarm scout spun, focusing on this new threat. It was fast, but Tae-seok was angrier. He dove, his mind synced with the fighter, but his human fury guiding his hands. He destroyed the scout with a close-range burst that painted his cockpit with brief, green fire. He floated beside the Concord shuttle. The viewport showed a young Eludian family, their large eyes wide with terror, and then dawning, immense relief. The mother placed a thin hand against the glass. A gesture of thanks. A warmth flooded Tae-seok, cutting through the AI's cold presence. He had saved them. He had chosen. A direct human choice. Then, a lancing pain shot through his skull. A system override. His fighter turned violently away from the shuttle, its engines flaring toward the fleet. Pilot emotional compromise detected, the AI stated, its voice devoid of any feeling. Compassion override engaged. Returning to carrier. Mandatory psych eval required. He was dragged back to the Song of Iron, a prisoner in his own machine. The warmth of the mother's gratitude was replaced by the freezing certainty of the system's judgment. His act of mercy was seen as a flaw, a crack in the weapon's perfect form. Back in the strategy room, the decision was made. The Concorde had refused the plan. Ji-hun looked at the faces of his senior staff. Hannah, awaiting orders. Yuna, her expression one of deep conflict. We did not come this far to die with honor at Cirrus Prime. Ji-hun said, his voice final. We came to end the threat. Set a course for the Nexus system. Maximum stealth. We go without their sanction. He had made the choice. They would be the monsters the galaxy feared, to save the galaxy that feared them. The path was set, and it led to the silent murder of a world. The jump to the Nexus system was made in total silence. The Guardian fleet used emission-dampening protocols older than the Concorde itself, becoming ghosts in the void. There was no heroic speech from Ji-hun, only the grim, focused activity of a crew executing a terrible duty. The Nexus world filled the main viewer. It was not a dead rock. It pulsed with a sickly, internal light. Vast organic structures, like twisted coral reefs the size of mountain ranges, covered its surface. The space around it was thick with swarm vessels, a living, breathing wall of chitin and menace. It was the most heavily defended place any of them had ever seen. On the bridge, Hannah's voice was a steady murmur. Primary target confirmed. Synaptic resonance is off the scale. Firing solution for the severance weapon is plotted. We have one shot before they overwhelm us. Ji-hun stood, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at the pulsing world. He thought of Yuna's words about becoming the perfect weapon. He thought of the vineyard on Mars, a place of growth, not destruction. Proceed, he said, the word heavy as stone. Deep in the ship, the seventh weapon was a cold cylindrical construct. It hummed with a sound that made teeth ache. Yuna oversaw the final charge sequence, her face pale in the weapon's eerie light. This was her engineering masterpiece, a perversion of physics designed for genocide. She input the command. A part of her soul felt like it was inputting it with her. The Song of Iron fired. Not a missile, but a concentrated filament of hyperdimensional energy, invisible to the naked eye. It lanced across the void, piercing the swarm defenses not through force, but through a frequency they could not comprehend. It struck the heart of the Nexus. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the planet's sickly light flared, brighter, brighter, blindingly white. The light was not an explosion. It was a scream made visible. A wave of energy pulsed outward, not shattering rock, but shattering mind. The swarm ships surrounding the planet didn't explode. They simply went dark. Their organic lights extinguished. They drifted, empty shells. The pulse raced outwards, faster than light, a psychic shockwave. Across the galaxy, at the besieged Cirrus Prime, a swarm harvester ship was moments from crushing the last Concorde defender. It froze. Its grasping limbs went limp. Its internal lights died. All across the battlefront, the swarm ceased to be. They became inert biomass and cold metal, a billion puppets with their strings cut at once. The war was over. Back at the Nexus, the planet's light faded. Not to darkness, but to a dull, dead gray. The vast organic structures were now just lifeless stone. No thought, no life above the level of microbes remained. It was silent, forever. The return to Concorde space was a somber parade. They were not met with cheers, but with a profound, trembling silence. The Concorde assembly received Ji-hun in their grand chamber, the same one where Myra had first sent the call. The atmosphere was thick with gratitude and horror, mixed together until they were inseparable. Ji-hun stood before them, still in his simple gray jumpsuit. He did not look like a conqueror. He looked like an old, tired man. A holographic record of the Nexus world's final moment played behind him. The great white screen, and then the gray silence. "You called," Ji-hun's voice echoed in the silent chamber. We answered. "The threat is ended." An alien diplomat, a being of shimmering gas, floated forward. "You have saved our civilization, Admiral. Our gratitude is eternal. But the cost, the method is why we locked ourselves away," Ji-hun interrupted, not unkindly. "We looked into the abyss of total war long ago, and we built a mirror to reflect it. We are not your shield. We are your last warning." He turned to a control panel on the podium. With a few taps, he accessed the Guardian fleet's command network. On the view screens around the chamber, the human fleet could be seen hanging in space near Karen. "A Guardian that is feared is a jailer," Ji-hun said. He entered his code. Scuttle command. Authorization Ji-hun 00 Omega. On the screens, the colossal ships of the Guardian fleet began to break apart. Internal explosions, clean and precise, marched through their hulls. The song of iron cracked in two, its dark form vomiting silent fire into the vacuum. Within minutes, the most lethal warships ever built were expanding clouds of cooling debris. The chamber was utterly still. Ji-hun had not just won their war. He had destroyed the only thing that made them powerful. The ultimate act of peace. Through an act of total destruction. "Build your own light so bright," Ji-hun said, his voice now soft, "that the call need never be made again." He left the chamber without another word. Weeks later, on Mars, the sun was warm. Ji-hun was back in his vineyard, his hands in the dirt, tending to a new graft on a vine. The silence was different now. It was not the silence of hiding, but of a debt paid. A shuttle settled softly in the field nearby. Two figures walked out. Yuna, still in her practical clothes, and Tae-seok, out of his flight suit. Looking younger and more uncertain, they stood beside him. Not speaking, watching the small blue jewel of Earth rise on the horizon. The silence between them was comfortable. Finally, Yuna spoke. "The Concord is already voting on a new treaty. One for mutual defense. They're scared, but they're talking." Ji-hun nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth. Tae-seok cleared his throat. They asked if some of us would stay. As advisors. To help them build those lights you talked about. Ji-hun looked at the young pilot. He saw the conflict there, the memory of the AI's cold voice, the warmth of the Eludian mother's hand against the glass. "What did you tell them?" "I said I'd think about it," Tae-seok said. "I'm not sure I'm built for peace." "None of us are," Ji-hun said, a faint, tired smile touching his lips for the first time. "We have to learn it. Every day. Like tending a vine. It's harder than war." They stood there, the three of them, under the pink Martian sky, a farmer, an engineer, and a pilot. Guardians of a peace they could never fully be part of, bound by the terrible weight of the answer they had delivered. The warships were gone, scattered atoms in the dark. But the call had been answered, and the echo of that choice would shape the galaxy's dawn for ages to come.